question number one. Who am I? Look, beginning verse 15. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on the earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. Here's the irony. The question is, who am I? It almost seems like the text didn't answer the question. If you're starting with me, if you're starting with man, and my question is, who am I? Why does the text start with, he is? Because of the supremacy of Christ and truth. You see, the text begins with Christ as the creator of all things. So the answer to the question, who am I, begins with who Jesus is. He is the image of the invisible God. He is the icon, if you will. He is the exact representation. He is the picture in human flesh of who God is. He is God on this earth. He is God with us, God among us. He is the Almighty. For by him all things were created. He is the creator of all things. Well, which things? In heaven? On earth? Thrones, dominions, rulers, authorities, all things were made by him. All things were made through him. This harkens back to John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Which also harkens back to Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If we continue to read, we find these marvelous words. Let us make man in our image and in our likeness. So who am I? Secular humanism says that I am the result of random processes. Christian theism says I am the crowning glory of the creation of God. Christian theism says he knit me together in my mother's womb. Christian theism says I am no accident. I am no result of random processes. Christian theism says whether I am tall and beautiful or whether I am small and not so handsome, whether my body functions perfectly or I am deformed severely, I am the crowning glory of the creation of God. And as a result, I have inherent dignity and inherent worth and inherent value. Christian theism cannot comprehend ideas like racism and classism and eugenics. Christian theism looks at the black man and the not so black man. You categorize the world how you want to. I categorize the world how I want to. But it's okay that you're not black like me. God loves you just like you are. And the question always comes, well, if that's the case, it's always hovering, even when people don't ask it. The question hovers, it lingers. I don't like lingering and hovering questions. I say, let's get it over with. Here's the lingering and hovering question. You say that in the context and confines of this Christian theism, there is no room for this kind of racism, but we know for a fact that there have been cultures who claimed on the one hand this allegiance to Christian theism, and on the other hand, they embraced racism and slavery. What are you going to do with that? I don't have to do anything with that. Narrative is not normative. Just because it happened doesn't mean it was right. Here's my issue. It stopped. What made it stop? What was the underlying worldview that rose up and said, this is inconsistent? What was the underlying worldview that says we are an exercise in cognitive dissonance here? What was the underlying worldview that rose up and said, you cannot on the one hand claim allegiance to Christian theism and on the other hand despise men because of the color of their skin? Was it wrong? Yes, it was wrong. But by what standard? By the standard of the supremacy of Christ. Secular humanism can't grasp this truth. But when we grasp the supremacy of Christ, we can't escape this truth. Who am I? Who are you? The crowning glory of the creation of God. I don't care what anyone has ever said to you, what anyone has ever told you. I don't care if your mother and your father looked you in your eye and told you that you were a mistake. You are the crowning glory of the creation of God. I will never forget the moment I grasped this. I spent much of my life wondering why. I was raised by a single teenage mother in the projects in South Central Los Angeles. She was 17 years old when she became pregnant with me. She and my father married briefly, but she ended up raising me alone from the time I was about a year old. Raising me in the drug-infested, gang-infested projects in South Central Los Angeles, where at that time the average life expectancy for a young black male was somewhere around 24. I have often asked why. Especially in light of our culture today that looks at young women in my mother's condition and says, it would be irresponsible for you to carry this pregnancy through. But who am I? The crowning glory of the creation of God. Regardless of the circumstances surrounding my birth or yours. Regardless of difficulties or infirmities with which you wrestle. Regardless of your class or your station in life. Because of the supremacy of Christ in truth, you are what the creator of the universe says you are. And by breathing into you the very breath of life, he says you have value. He says you have dignity. He says you have worth. And he says that I had better recognize that in you as well as in myself.